They say winter is a teacher. It humbles even the proudest among us. You feel it when the cold creeps in through the cracks in your home, through the silence that fills the room after the heater shuts off, and you're left alone with the sound of your own breath. And in those moments, as we layer on blankets or squint at rising energy bills, we might wonder, how did those who came before us survive winters that were colder, harsher, and without a single modern convenience? The truth is, they didn't just survive. In many ways, they mastered the cold with an elegance and ingenuity we've long forgotten. What we call primitive was often purposeful, crafted from generations of necessity, intuition, and a deep relationship with the environment. Today, we warm ourselves with electricity and oil. But in the Middle Ages, they did something far more extraordinary. They learned to make heat linger, to stretch a single flame across time and space. At the center of this forgotten brilliance stood the medieval hearth. Not just a fireplace, but the living heart of the home, positioned not in a corner, but in the center of the main room, bold, exposed, and deliberate. Its design wasn't accidental. The large stones surrounding the hearth weren't for show. They were heat batteries. They absorbed fire's warmth during the day, holding it like a secret, and slowly releasing it through the long, bitter night. Modern archaeologists have found scorch marks on the stone floors of medieval homes, proof that some of these hearths reached temperatures exceeding 300 degrees Fahrenheit. But what's more astonishing is how long they held that heat. Even 12 hours after the fire died, those stones radiated warmth, sustaining life in homes where windows were mere slits and insulation was unheard of. And the smoke. It wasn't waste, it was woven into the plan. Many medieval homes had no chimneys. Instead, smoke found its own path, drifting slowly upward through the rafters and escaping through thatched gaps in the roof. The result wasn't suffocation, it was preservation. That smoke kept away pests, it cured meats, it sterilized wooden beams. In short, it turned the very act of keeping warm into a form of alchemy, transmuting fire into food, protection, and survival. But even the hearth had its limits. And that's where the genius of community emerged. Imagine a village square on a frostbitten dawn. In the center, a communal fire burns, not decorative, not symbolic, but essential. These fires were not flickering campfires. They were massive flames, stoked day and night. Entire families would take shifts tending them, ensuring no ember died out. They weren't just heat sources, they were lifelines. Some villages had what were called warming houses, enclosed structures where dozens could gather. They were the medieval equivalent of modern co-working spaces, town halls, and social networks blended into one. People worked by firelight, shared stories, prepared meals together. There are written records from the 13th century describing marriages arranged, disputes resolved, and even legal proceedings held beside these flames. One account from 1267 tells of a property dispute over a chicken settled not in a court, but by a group of elders, their feet warming by the communal fire. Decisions were made not in cold chambers, but beside warmth, laughter, and collective memory. What's perhaps most striking is the architectural precision with which these communal fires were placed. Historians studying the remains of village layouts found that warming houses were built with prevailing wind patterns in mind, ensuring smoke blew away from residential quarters. There was no guesswork, unlike careful, practical design. But not everyone could or wanted to spend their nights at the village hearth. That's when personal ingenuity took over. Entered the chauffeur's portable hand warmers, centuries ahead of their time. Small metal spheres, often made from iron or copper, filled with hot coals and tucked into pockets, cloaks, or sleeves. They were the medieval version of a portable battery pack, except instead of charging your phone, they kept your fingers from going numb. These weren't crude devices. Some were ornate, etched with family crests or religious symbols. Wealthy households owned chauffettes made of silver or gold. Merchants in 14th century Paris stocked dozens of varieties, each designed for specific uses. Hand warmers, boot warmers, even lap warmers for cold church pews. Then there were the pocket stones, smooth river stones, heated by the fire and wrapped in cloth. Archaeologists have found them by the thousands across Europe, many with wear patterns suggesting they were carried daily. Some stones even had grooves worn down by fingers gripping them tightly during long walks or icy sermons. These stones weren't just for hands. They were tucked into beds, shoes, under shirts, and even laid beneath cloaks to warm the back. Incredibly, medieval doctors prescribed specific stone shapes for specific ailments. Flat stones for stomach aches, curved stones for back pain. And, while it might sound quaint, modern heat therapy shows they weren't wrong. One recorded incident from 1422 tells of a man who stole another's heated stone at church and was forced to supply the entire congregation with warm stones for the rest of winter. That wasn't just justice, it was thermal restitution. And then there was the barn. Today, the idea of sharing your home with livestock might seem unthinkable. But in the medieval world, it was revolutionary heating science. Cows produce roughly 1,000 BTUs of body heat per hour, the same as a small space heater. Horses, sheep, Even pigs radiate warmth that can raise the ambient temperature of adjacent rooms by as much as 10 degrees. Medieval builders knew this. That's why many homes were attached directly to barns, especially on the north side to block winds and absorb the animals' heat. Studies of preserved medieval farmhouses confirm that rooms sharing a wall with livestock stayed significantly warmer than those without. There's even a rental record from 1415, listing lower rent prices for homes that didn't share a wall, with the barn essentially charging extra for built-in biological heating. These weren't just farmers, they were thermal architects. But perhaps most remarkable is how deeply intentional this all was. Nothing was wasted. Every ember had purpose. Even the shape of fireplaces evolved for efficiency. Some were built with polished brass or copper reflectors behind them, bouncing heat back into the room like primitive radiators. Tests on surviving reflectors show they could raise a room's temperature by up to 30%. One French nobleman in the 14th century installed silver-plated walls in his great hall. Historians originally thought it was vanity, but later analysis revealed he had created a massive, medieval heat amplifier. It was engineering disguised as opulence. In some monasteries, curved metal panels were used to direct heat into infirmaries, a system of reflective gods' mirrors, as the monks called them. These designs predate our understanding of heat radiation by centuries. And just when you think they'd exhausted every solution, they turned their attention to the bed. Medieval warming pans were deceptively simple, long-handled pans filled with hot coals, slid between the sheets moments before sleep. Rich households often had servants dedicated to bed warming. Poorer families did it themselves. Some pans were inscribed with prayers or jokes, like one from 1435 reading, "Sweet dreams. Don't let the ice bite." To prevent fires, towns appointed bed warming inspectors. Their job: ensure nobody used dangerous coals that might ignite the bedding. One 15th century nobleman even commissioned 6 pans to be rotated throughout the night, his version of climate control. Yet even without pans, warmth was possible. Canopy beds, with thick curtains and covered tops, acted as thermal cocoons. Tests on recreated beds show body heat alone could raise the interior temperature by 15 degrees in under 10 minutes. It was private insulation before anyone understood the word. Some even built secret compartments into bedposts for hand warmers or small stones, proof that comfort wasn't luxury. It was survival by design. And then there was sunlight. Before solar panels, before thermostats, medieval builders aligned their homes with the sun. South-facing windows, thick stone walls, and deeply recessed frames were optimized to trap the day's warmth and release it at night. Some houses were angled precisely 17.5 degrees east of south, the perfect winter orientation. Not superstition, calculation. Archaeological studies show certain castles and manor homes had sunrooms where walls were up to 6 feet thick, giant thermal batteries, recharging every day. And beneath all this, the floors, because someone, somewhere, had a revolutionary idea. What if we heated the ground beneath our feet? Large stones, heated by fire, were slid under floorboards or benches. In elite homes, a team of servants rotated them hourly. They warmed the sick and elderly. These stones, some weighing over 30 pounds, could retain heat for 6 hours. They were placed with care, in patterns, in cycles, in rhythm with the sun and fire. It was central heating. In the 14th century, and it worked. If the hearth was the heart of the medieval home, then the stone was its memory. Every wall, every floor, every foundation carried the imprint of a civilization that saw warmth not as a luxury, but as a right earned through craft, collaboration, and time. But warmth, in the Middle Ages, was more than physical. It was spiritual, symbolic. To live through winter was to pass through a trial land in many ways. Heating the home became an expression of deeper knowledge. Knowledge not just of fire, but of form, direction, energy, and the hidden mathematics of nature. And that knowledge didn't vanish because it was useless. It vanished because it was replaced, and perhaps forgotten a little too quickly. The Industrial Revolution promised us power. Steam, coal, gas, electricity. Progress marched forward, loud and bright, but in its enthusiasm, it bulldozed centuries of subtler wisdom. What medieval builders knew, what they intuited, we are only now beginning to rediscover under the sterile name of passive design. We think of ourselves as innovators, but the ancients were architects of nature. Take, for example, the forgotten science of thermal zoning. Today we install smart thermostats to regulate temperatures across different rooms, but medieval manors, castles, and monasteries achieved similar results with nothing but stone, wood, and light. Rooms were divided by function and temperature. Storage areas were buried partially underground, cool in summer, insulated in winter. Bedrooms were built on upper levels where rising heat would collect. Kitchens were often placed at the home's corner for convenience, but to radiate warmth outward like a sun. Some records even describe heat wells, hollowed-out columns, filled with stones or water jars to store solar warmth and gradually release it through shared walls. These weren't random flukes, they were part of a system. An ecosystem, really one where material, climate, and behavior moved in harmony. And what's more haunting is that traces of this system remain. Hidden in plain sight, in southern Germany, a 12th century farmhouse was recently excavated. Beneath its floor, archaeologists discovered an intricate understructure of hollowed-out tiles, each precisely shaped to allow airflow from a nearby hearth to circulate beneath the floorboards. It's nearly identical to the Roman hypocaust system, which had vanished centuries earlier. Had it really vanished, or had someone, somewhere, remembered? It raises a deeper question: how much of what we credit to the ancients was actually preserved by the medieval mind and then lost again in modernity's rush? Because what we find, time and again, is that these forgotten techniques weren't isolated. They were part of a continuum, a stream of evolving intelligence passed down quietly, often through monasteries, guilds, or oral tradition. One such tradition involved the use of heat catchers, niches built into sun-facing walls, often painted black or filled with dark ceramics to maximize heat absorption. During the day, these alcoves would store warmth like solar batteries. At night, families would place pots of water or bricks into them to slowly release the heat into the room. Many thought these niches were purely decorative, but thermal imaging, studies conducted at several medieval sites in England and northern France revealed their hidden function. They weren't aesthetic, they were strategic. Even more extraordinary is what they suggest that medieval people understood, at least intuitively, the behavior of radiant energy. Not just heat, but light. Because some of these niches weren't only built to catch sunlight, they were angled to reflect moonlight as well, and that opens a doorway. Because once you begin to peel back these layers, once you admit the possibility that medieval architecture wasn't random, but encoded, you start to see patterns. Patterns that hint at a level of metaphysical knowledge embedded in the very bones of the buildings. Take the abbeys. Their chapels weren't just places of worship, they were residence chambers, built to amplify not only sound, but warmth. High ceilings captured rising heat. Thick stone walls stored it. But more curiously, some of these chapels aligned with solstice sunrises, not merely for symbolic illumination, but for thermal gain. In winter, that sliver of sunlight piercing through a high stained glass window wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. And then there are the manuscripts. In a monastery near Lucca, Italy, a 14th century codex was discovered buried deep in a forgotten library. Amidst prayers and herbal recipes was a curious passage describing a stone of breath, a smooth slab, placed above a chamber vent, designed to capture warm air from below and distribute it evenly across a room. The drawing resembles a modern diffuser, yet it was dated to 1321. Was it a fluke, a mad monk scribble, or the echo of a knowledge far older than we assume? Because the deeper you look, the more you see that medieval minds did not draw lines between the physical and the mystical. Warmth wasn't just comfort, it was connection to the land, the heavens, and each other. And nowhere is this more visible than in the Bathhouses. Long before modern plumbing, medieval Europe hosted a thriving culture of communal bathing. In towns from Prague to York, public bathhouses used ingenious heating systems that blended Roman legacy with local innovation. Wood-fired cauldrons beneath the floors, copper tanks with heat exchangers, steam channeled through hollow stone benches. All designed not only to clean the body, but to maintain social and spiritual health during the harshest months. Documents from the 1300s describe rituals of bathing. That included herbal steam infusions, heated stones for massage, and thermal gradients between rooms to mimic what we now call the spa experience. One Bavarian bathhouse even had a silent chamber, lined with curved stone panels, it seems, to trap warmth and sound alike. Historians once dismissed it as superstition, but modern acousticians and thermographers found it nearly perfect for heat retention and sonic resonance. A sensory cocoon, a place of inner transformation, and still, the question lingers. How did they know? Because what begins as a story about warmth becomes something deeper. It becomes a story about what we've chosen to remember and what we've been allowed to forget. Modern heating isolates us. We flip switches in silence. We shut doors, we fragment warmth into tiny, contained spaces. But the medieval world was holistic. It saw fire as a shared entity, heat as a community effort, architecture as ritual. They didn't heat rooms, they heated relationships. A 14th century Welsh proverb survives. He who shares a fire shares a fate. That's not just poetry, that's engineering, philosophy, and culture compressed into a single flame. But what if there was more? Because not all medieval heating methods were domestic. Some hint at something far stranger, something that doesn't quite fit within the neat lines of official history. In the ruins of an abbey in northern Spain, archaeologists found a peculiar structure beneath the chapel floor. At first glance, it resembled a crypt, but deeper investigation revealed a pattern of air channels, heat-scorched stones, and mica-lined walls. Mica is a reflective mineral. It's used in modern technology for insulation and signal reflection. What was it doing in a 13th century basement? And then there's the so-called stone of whispering heat, a black polished slab found in a collapsed manor house in Languedoc. It retains warmth longer than any other stone in the region. When struck, it resonates, audibly a pure tone, like a tuning fork. Local legend says it was a gift from a traveler who did not eat, but burned within. Easy to dismiss such stories as metaphor, but when multiple sites across Europe reveal similar materials, similar designs, and similar anomalies, you begin to wonder, was there a deeper science at work here? One that blurred the line between heat and harmony, architecture and awareness. Perhaps that's what we lost, just heating methods, but an entire worldview. One where nature was not conquered, but understood, where warmth was not manufactured, but cultivated, where homes didn't fight the cold. They danced with it, and when you think about that, when you look at your flickering screen, your thermostat, your insulated walls, it starts to feel like we haven't progressed at all. We've just built louder machines. They've built quieter wisdom. And now, centuries later, we're left digging in the ashes, hoping to recover even a spark. We begin in silence. The kind of silence that only winter brings. You can almost hear it settling across the thatched rooftops of a medieval village, weaving through stone corridors, blanketing the land with stillness. And yet beneath that hush, something ancient stirs, not just the crackle of a distant fire, but something older, something waiting to be remembered, because warmth, in its purest form, is not a technology. It's a language. And the people of the Middle Ages knew how to speak it fluently with tools we've long since buried beneath our definitions of progress. But what if they didn't just understand heat? What if they understood energy in a way we no longer do? Consider the floor heating stones from noble manors, monasteries, and peasant homes alike. We've examined them as practical tools, primitive thermal mass. But recent experiments with reconstructed sites show something strange. Some of these stones emit trace electromagnetic fields when heated. Not powerful, not dangerous, just present. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. But it's there, and it raises a question. Did medieval builders choose certain stones because of this? Were they aware, even unconsciously, that some materials didn't just hold warmth, but resonated? After all, they were meticulous about their materials. Granite for durability. Sandstone for breathability. Slate for reflectivity. But black basalt and magnetite stones with known conductive properties show up with unusual frequency in hearths, footings, and thresholds. Coincidence maybe, or maybe not, because scattered throughout Europe are structures that defy explanation. Stone chambers, often subterranean, with narrow entryways aligned to specific solstice or lunar positions. The mainstream labels them grain storage or ritual sites. But in the cold months, when the sun strikes just right, the chambers warm disproportionately, faster, longer, and with a kind of eerie precision. It's as if they weren't built to fight the cold but to invite something else, something beyond fire. There are accounts buried in the margins of monastic texts, wrapped in metaphor and guarded by ecclesiastical language, describing heat without flame, stone that sings, and rooms that breathe. Most historians dismiss these as poetic flourishes, allegory, imagination, but they reappear, again and again, across cultures and centuries. In Norse sagas, in Welsh bardic verses, in Arabic treatises translated in the libraries of Toledo, always in the dead of winter, always tied to warmth, memory, and light. And then, there are the vaults, hidden chambers beneath abbeys, castles, and cathedral foundations. Many are still sealed. Some have been opened only recently. In one such vault, beneath a ruined priory in Norfolk, a team of researchers discovered what they first believed to be a furnace, but no soot, no chimney, no fuel source. Just a circular stone, discily polished, resting on bronze stilts, surrounded by a ring of crushed quartz. Heat radiated from it, not much, but measurable. Days after the vault had been breached, theories abound. Geothermal vent, magnetic anomaly, fraud, but none fully explain it. The disc bore an inscription, faint but legible, Latin, mixed with a script older than Latin. The phrase translated loosely to, "The flame remembers." No one knows what it means, but it echoes something profound. Because throughout medieval Europe, flame was not just warmth, it was intelligence. The monks who copied ancient texts by candlelight believed that fire could illuminate the soul as well as the page. The hearths of northern tribes were considered sacred spaces, portals through which ancestors spoke. Alchemists saw fire, not as destruction, but as transformation. Could it be that in warming themselves, they were also listening? Somewhere along the way, that reverence was lost. Heat became noise pumped through vents, controlled by digital dials, sold in kilowatt hours. We forgot how to sit with fire, how to feel its rhythm, how to know it, but remnants remain. In stone-walled farmhouses that stay warm without power. In the ruins of bathhouses whose architecture rivals modern thermal spas. In manuscripts whose margins whisper of warmth drawn from earth, water, and sky. We are only beginning to listen, again, and perhaps that's the true inheritance of the medieval mind, not their tools, but their attention. They watched the sun, they listened to the stones. They felt the wind, not as weather, but as instruction. Their survival was never passive. It was participatory, and that, maybe, is the secret we've lost. Because somewhere between central heating and climate control, we stopped participating. We stopped designing with the world and started building against it. But the past is patient. It waits beneath the floorboards. It lingers in old cathedrals where warmth still gathers in places no one understands. It burns low in the hearths of forgotten villages where winters were long and memories were longer. And if we choose to remember, if we listen, not just to history, but to the hum beneath it, we might yet recover what they knew. Not just how to stay warm, but how to belong again. To the fire, and perhaps that's what the flame remembers most. Not the cold it defeated, but the people it connected, the families that gathered, the stories passed, the breath, the laughter, the silence shared. And in that silence, in that glow, in that final flicker before night fell, they left us something. Not a blueprint, but a whisper. And if you're quiet enough, you can still hear it. Beneath the hum of the furnace, beyond the click of the thermostat, in the ancient warmth of stone, waiting to be felt again, waiting to return.